evening. I'll be right there. Good evening.
1, 2, 3.
Good evening. All right, I'm just going to scream. Good evening. I'd like to call the August 3rd Town Board meeting to order. Ms. Marco, please call the roll.
Mr. Christo, absent. Mrs. Miller-Herrera,
Present.
Mr. Dodson,
Present.
Mr. Mastriani,
Present.
Mrs. Collins.
Present.
4 present, 1 absent.
Thank you, Ms. Marco. A quorum is present. Mr. Dodson, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now, can anybody hear me?
No.
All right. I'll really, how about that? Can you hear me now?
Better.
Okay, we're going to open up privilege of the floor. I would just remind everybody when they come to the microphone, adjust it because it's working about as good as mine so that everyone can hear you. Please state your name and address. And you have 4 minutes. When it gets close to 4 minutes, you'll see my hand go up so you can just start to wrap up your comments, okay? Ms. Marco, is there anybody who wishes to speak?
Craig Foote.
Good evening. My name is Craig Foote. I live at 21 Princetown Road here in Rotterdam. Madam Supervisor and board members, in regards to the lease agreement signed by the previous administration for space at the Viewport Mall, I feel as many other that this agreement should be dropped, and I have heard that the town does have the first right of refusal. In recent days, 2 board members have reversed their position and now are no longer in favor of the agreement. It should be noted, in the process of putting this agreement together, no public forum was ever held to discuss the proposal or its contents. The proposal also never included a lease to purchase option. It is line items like this that get the taxpayers of the town of Rotterdam in trouble. How was this agreement allowed to be signed without going through the proper channels of discussion on it? Did the previous administration feel it was okay to circumvent these procedures? This is why they were put in place overall. Were there any other options reviewed? Lastly, the new members of the board campaigned last year on reducing taxes in their town. According to the website niche.com, Rotterdam has 29,787 residents. The overall score for the town was a B. The town scored a B in categories such as public schools, housing, good for families, jobs, cost of living, crime and safety, diversity, health and fitness, as well as commute. It even scored an A for outdoor activities. These are all based on similar towns in size and stature like that of Rotterdam. Where Rotterdam fails to score well is taxes. It scored a D. This means numerous other towns with the same residency and services have far less taxes. Let me state that again. Other towns, similar in residency, have far less, not nominally less, not even a little less, far less. The town of Rotterdam residents do not need any further tax burden. I kindly ask the board to work with the town attorney to dismiss this agreement and dissolve Resolution 214.21 and recoup the down payment. I thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you.
Greg DiLorenzo.
Hello. I would have a lot to say, but this man that was just up here basically said it all. And I thank you.
Renee Mertens.
Renee Mertens, Maida Lane, Rotterdam. I was here last November when I first heard of Valueport, and I was here when it was the previous administration for the town of Rotterdam. I voiced my concern about non-transparency then, and I want to thank this current board for the transparency that they are currently having, because I've been able to watch every single town board meeting from my home, and I'm very up to date with what's happening here, so I wanted to thank each and every single one of you for that. What I have to say is what these other people have said. When I was here back in November, my concern was I was a new resident of Rotterdam, even though I grew up here, and the taxes were high. I really thought twice about coming here, but I did. What I would like to say is I am not in favor of a lease for the Viaport. I would like the town to take a long look at the police department, anything that we can do for the courts. We should purchase, we should not lease. I would also like to say I work at 93 West Campbell Ave. I work for the state, I work for the Department of Taxation and Finance. Unfortunately, the taxpayers are the financiers. So I would like to say, please, just keep us abreast of what the next steps will be. I am opposed to the lease. I would like to see this board vote against the resolution from last fall or whenever that happened, because it was all in the dark. I would like to say one thing about 93 West Campbell Ave. It's desolate. I've watched it crumble since I've worked there. It's depressing. I've watched business after business after business after business after business leave. It's now filled with Vegas-style weddings. It's ridiculous. Viaport is not a good manager of their own building. I would really think hard about wanting to have any lease with that company. I think they should work on maybe theaters, getting some good brands in there. They failed, so I don't think the town should be jumping in to help them out. It may be an open, available space, but it may not be the only alternative. So I would really like everybody to take a hard look at what options are for our police department, and particularly our court, and maybe just take a look at staying here for the residents. We own this building. We own all the buildings. I would like to see a purchase and not a lease. And I will leave the rest to what the future brings for the town of Rotterdam. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Brenda Katorzian. Brenda Katorzian.
Brenda Trojan, 1033 6th Street. My 4 minutes does not start now. There's a revised version, you'll get that next week.
Okay.
Oh, I see we got one absent person. There's his. Just about everybody that's been up here is basically saying the same thing, so I'm going to keep repeating because it's worth repeating. First of all, I don't know why we're going to Viaport in the first place. I don't know why the previous administration did that. Again, I'll reiterate what I said in the past. We're a government agency. We're not an agency that's here to bail out Viaport. They messed it up. They messed it up. They need to deal with it. This building is paid for. I understand there's work to be done at the court. Why would anybody want to go to a place where you're leasing, and in 10 years, you might have the option to buy it, and if you can't do it, now what happens? You just gave, the previous administration did this, and I know I'm going to get hell for what I'm saying, but you're going to give $4 million to lease, and if they say you're out of here, you just wasted $4 million of taxpayers' money and still haven't told us how this is being paid for. I know it didn't happen with this board. It happened with 2 board members sitting there. And yes, Mr. Evans, I will not pronounce his last name because I don't want to hurt it. Yeah, he said that he's against it because, and the only reason why he's against it as of last week is because there wasn't an option to buy. If you put a buy in there, he'll be for it again. Mrs. Miller, The last time she abstained, and as far as I'm concerned, and abstained from a vote is basically saying, yeah, I'm for it, but I'm not going to put my fingerprints on it. I'm not going to put my fingerprints on it. And where is Mr. Evans at a very important meeting? Unless he has a previous engagement, all of us here are paying his salary, and he can't show up because he got his hand caught in the cookie jar last week? You know, I'm being serious. I'm not trying to be sarcastic, but this is a very important decision, and for him not to show up because, you know, a couple of us brought it to his attention that, yeah, he was part of the problem. Now, I got a problem with that. And we don't want to go to Viaport. Even if they decide to say you can buy it. We don't, I've been huffing it since the end of June. House to house, 90-degree weather. People do not want to go to Viaport, lease or sale. They want to stay here. And the other thing, Mr. Gillarelli, I know I'm pronouncing the name wrong, said last week that Viaport gave the town of Rotterdam $9 million.
I did.
Yes, you did. You look at the tape. Look at the tape. Because I won't make that up, sir. And the same consideration I gave you, you need to give us. If they gave us,
Speak to us. Yeah, speak to us. not-
if, well, he spoke to me directly. If Viaport did give $9 million to Rotterdam, where did that $9 million go? Because that $9 million could fix this place up and maybe do what it needs to be doing at the town court. Thank you. And I want to say one thing. Molly, thank you very much for holding this meeting tonight. I know it was you that did this. So thank you very much.
It's good.
Robert Godlewski.
Bob Godlewski, 1046 Maintenance Drive. Am I all right here? A little bit higher. After last week's meeting, I have to admit I left her confused. But since then, there's been 2 articles in the Gazette. I understand now what's being presented, okay? One thing that really concerns me, because I watched all those meetings and what went for, and I know Mr. Crystal's not here, but Mrs. Herrera is. And we had 2 lawyers, a financial consultant, and 2 businessmen that approved the resolution to allow the supervisor to negotiate the contract. And I guess I have to ask Mrs. Herrera, because what I'm reading here, it appears that the board then assumed that there was a rent versus buy in the contract. All right, now I know it was a 46-page document, but was that your understanding, Mr. Christos? It's up to you if you want to speak.
I mean, technically, there's,
Okay, I understand.
They generally don't.
I listen, I know, but I will make this comment to a comment that was just made about Mrs. Herrera. There were 2 resolutions that had to do with Viaport. One was in August, which Mrs. Herrera supported. There was another one in December 1st, which she abstained for a reason. It's important that you understand that, all right? I always like to deal with the facts, all right? And we'll leave it at that. Now, in the Gazette articles, Mr. Christo, and I don't know why, I've never seen this, and I've been up there, he made some comments about the former town attorney, Mrs. McGurl. I don't know why he said those things, but he made it sound like information was being withheld. I don't know whether it was. But he added this, I'm reading the Gazette article now, and he made a comment. A challenge as a part-time government official is that you rely on full-time 6-figure employees to be doing the right thing for you. Well, I can assure you, in the town of Rotterdam, there are not a lot of employees making 6 figures. That is not true, and here, regardless of the salary, I don't think that those comments were appropriate. I just want to make a couple other points and I'll be done. You heard me mention the August resolution. That gave the supervisor the authority to negotiate that agreement. That didn't do any harm, okay? What really harmed, and I watched both videos before I came here tonight, the August 11th meeting and the December 1st. The December 1st meeting was to allocate the funds, the $1 million, to pay for it. And Mr. Mastriani got up to the mic and asked the town board, because at that time we thought we were going to go over the tax cap. He was concerned about spending money at that point in time and that we should table it and move forward when we had more financial information. Mr. Christo's comments were that, well, we think it's the best thing possible. However, we know we're going to get additional information. Big disconnect somewhere here. 2 more points. I don't know how the board's going to vote tonight. I'm sure we're going to find out very shortly. It's not an easy decision. My concern is somebody's got $1 million of my money. All right? And I know contracts and legalese and all that, but I got a real sore spot in my stomach for that $1 million. One last comment, and I ended it last week. No matter what we do, we have to get a better facility for the police department and the justice court. Believe me, I haven't been there in front of the judge, but when I tell you, it's terrible. It's an embarrassment to this town. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ray Stanton.
Raymond Stanton, 617 Duanesburg Road. I'll try to be brief. After last week's meeting and some information was shared, I think it brought up more questions about how this $9 million was going to be raised, what departments needed more space. There was no indication of what was needed, and we just saw a blueprint of what was proposed, but there was no sharing of what input was done by each department, who really needed more space, and that kind of thing. I questioned the legality of the signing of the lease with the mall, as there was no public notice and there was no voter input obtained by the previous administration. We all understand that the town board has an obligation to research and offer solutions, but I don't see how the town could have obligated the tax-paying residents for this lease without some kind of referendum to the public. We agree the town court is short of space, is not ADA compliant. There are other buildings such as Office Max and Staples that could have handled the space requirements for the court. If there was a need for file retention should be handled by digital solutions, not buying more filing cabinets that require expensive office space. The town's solution should only include property that will be owned by the town and not a rental for 10 years or 30 years or something like that. $9 million in expenditures, and it does not even include the cost of the building, seems extreme and outrageous. Something needs to be set aside for buying a building. Many residents of this town are on fixed incomes and are already paying, and we, the taxpayer, are already paying back over 10 years of assessment lawsuits by GE against the town of Rotterdam. We are already paying for issues from the past. We need to find cost-effective solutions going forward. Taxpayers are now worried that over the years, since many solutions have not been found for water districts, water flooding issues, and we feel that all of a sudden we're going to get clobbered with double taxes when things finally get caught up and there's full disclosure of what should have happened and what kept on getting pushed back and pushed back. We simply can't afford double taxes. There are no new employers in the area. The town will continue to see a decline in population. The state of New York currently is losing 70,000 people a year due to increased taxes and lost opportunities. That only leaves nothing but tax increases for the residents that don't have the desire or the opportunity to move to another state. If we're going to do something for that mall, we need to find some way to bring jobs to Rotterdam, okay? Those government buildings that are there now that are renting from that mall, that wasn't bringing new jobs to Rotterdam. That's just moving jobs from other areas to this area, okay? You're only helping out the mall. You're not helping out the town of Rotterdam. As a single person property owner in this town, I have to say I get no services for my tax dollar other than fire protection. Our taxes are very high. With the increased number of apartment complexes in the town, you also find you're going to probably have to double the size of your police force to handle the issues coming from these residential apartments. For these kinds of properties, there's going to be also other services that are going to be required, such as school size, classrooms, and other kinds of things. We need to find things that are going to add value to Rotterdam and not more tax obligations. Mom and pop employers cannot afford to pay the new $15 minimum wage. You're going to see additional mom and pop stores and retail locations go vacant in Rotterdam. COVID is here to stay. That mall will never come back. People are ordering online. Amazon and all the other companies are on my street at least 3 trucks a day, okay? Lastly, 40 years ago, we stood in this room not wanting the mall as it was sitting on the Great Flats water aquifer. I find it amusing that here we are bailing out a failed mall and that we're now going to cost the local taxpayer for something we never wanted in the first place. Thank you.
Calvin Road.
Go, Cal.
Good evening, Calvin Rugg, 1107 Sunrise Boulevard. Thank you again for having another meeting. I think it's important. I'm glad to see more people here and getting up and speaking. So I'm going to try not to repeat because I think we've heard a lot of great things. Some things I wrote down was Mohawk Mall, Latham Circle Mall, they're gone. And I see that's what's going to happen to Viaport. And so if the town does decide to purchase a portion of that mall, I would wonder what would be left, I don't know, say less than 10 years from now, because that would be the possible purchase to own agreement maybe. So getting back to the possible referendum, I'm sure you're talking to the architects about it. When I used to do work for public schools, we would print boards and we would leave them in areas around town. So hopefully you're going to look at doing that if that's the way we go. I would suggest here Town Hall, Senior Center, maybe the firehouse down Rotterdam Junction, maybe the library. I know that that's been done before. On the board, you probably should have a little bit of description for Viaport as well as our current facility so people understand what they're getting for the money. But you got to be careful, right? Because you don't want too many cooks in the kitchen with that estimate. But what I would say is, I hope people think it's high already. I think it's probably okay, to be honest with you, being in the industry. I'm hoping there's an extra 20% in there for unknowns and escalation. Because by the time you get the vote, by the time you get on the street, we're talking 2 years, to be honest. And then just lastly, 2 more kind of drilling in things. One, energy efficiency. I hope we're looking at energy efficiency better than code, because we're going to own the building no matter what it is. That's a future expense. So maybe down at the mall, if it's the mall, PV panels in the parking lot for the police department. 1, it'll shade their cars. 2, we're going to have electric vehicles. They'll be able to plug them in. So, and then 2, if stormwater, if we stay at Town Hall, one thing, stormwater management for Sunrise Boulevard. Put it in there. So, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Joe Gittarelli.
Good evening. Joe Gittarelli, 2703 Myrtle Avenue.
and part of the previous administration. In regard to what I thought I spoke last week and Viaport investing in the town, the point I thought I made was that they invested, and I'm not even sure if 9 million was the exact number, but they did invest a lot of money into the town of Rotterdam. They are our neighbor and they do pay taxes, and so they have more of a stake in this town, or as much as anyone else that's a business owner. I'm still in favor of considering the move, and based on last week's presentation on the cost analysis, I think it's something we really need to look at. Investing in these old buildings, as I said last week, with their limited space does not make sense as far as I'm concerned. Trying to operate and offer services during construction will be very challenging, if not impossible. I would like to ask, and I don't need an answer right now, but maybe I should get an answer right now. I would like to ask that between last week's meeting and this week's meeting, has anyone reached out or spoken to anyone at Viaport in regard to last week's meeting? It is my understanding that they are willing to sit down and look at the lease, even renegotiate the lease. They are willing to look at the option to buy, as we, the previous administration, based most of our decisions on this was going to be our property to own, and therefore we were going to invest in our property. So did anyone reach out or just talk with anyone from Viaport since last week, and has anyone since last week reached out to the county for their assistance, their opinion? I see Eric Hess is here from the county. Him and I had some brief discussions yesterday at National Night Out in regard to, hey, has anybody reached out and spoken to you? See what the county can offer with this. So also, this administration right now, you have a tough decision to make, and it seems that putting this out to permissive referendum kind of is taking the decision off of what you, a board, was elected to do and look into, and it almost seems like, well, if we put it out to permissive referendum, typically those votes go, the people that are against the issue show up the most and they get shot down. So I don't know, are you not wanting to make this tough decision on the mall? I still think it's worth looking into, worth discussing, and sitting down with them all to see if we can work something out, and sitting down with the county. Points I made last week. The PD is in a school zone, so calls from the police department start off with cars that are usually traveling at a higher rate of speed are in a school zone that I think is 15 miles an hour. The use of the old facilities, what are we going to do with the old facilities? So just throwing some things out there. Town hall, do we make it a park? Do we turn it into something? Do we use it for drainage to finally get this road that it doesn't flood every time we get a major storm? And as far as the mall and its tenants, we heard some people discuss last week code enforcement or the lack thereof. I think the mall would have many more tenants down there if the town enforced more of its codes and stopped people operating roofing companies, maintenance companies out of their homes, construction companies where you have 2 and 3 and 4 commercial vehicles parked on side streets and residential roads, rather than maybe having an office down at the mall and parking all their vehicles down there. I think we can all agree the mall concept is pretty much done. That is it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have just something to read. Mr. Melvin Mintz wasn't able to make it. He wanted me to read this. He said he wanted the town board to know he wants to encourage the town board to get the $1 million back, to get it into the town's bank account, to get interest. So I read what he said.
Is there anybody in the audience, can you hear me? Is there anybody in the audience that might want to speak but didn't sign up? Okay, Megan, is there anybody on Zoom that wanted to speak?
Anybody want to speak? You can unmute.
somebody raise their hand.
Hi, Barbara Leffingwell, Floral Avenue. I only have one question. You guys are back and forth, do or don't. This buying the hunk of the mall, was anything addressed at the price? I haven't heard, if we were to buy that hunk of the mall, what's the ongoing price? In 10 years, what will they ask for then? If we don't buy it, they're up to sell it to somebody else. And now we say, bye-bye, I guess we gotta move. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Same.
Oh, we got one more.
Good evening. My name is Linda Testa. I live at 1020 Sunrise Boulevard. I just want to say I agree with all the speakers who spoke prior to me, with the exception of Mr. Gittarelli. Sorry. I don't want to repeat myself from last week. I think I made my point very, very clear that I am totally opposed with moving Town Hall to Viaport. One thing I failed to mention last week is that, you know, the Town Hall is centrally located for all of our residents, right? So it's really a great location. I understand the building needs work. It's going to cost money, but I don't think it's going to be nearly as much as it's going to be by relocating to Viaport. And as it's been mentioned, we could go there, we could rent, and then what do we have if they say, oh, we have another state office who wants to move in here? Because I guarantee you the state has a lot more money than the town of Rotterdam to rent space.
Yes, they do.
Okay? So I really believe we should own our buildings. We should not be renting our buildings. It was said last week too, by moving all the offices down there, it's going to bring more traffic, no. Moving our buildings to Viaport is keeping the lights on in the building. It is not our job to bail them out, okay? I worked 36 years in family court. I can assure you that most of the people that come to court, whether it's police court, family court, are not going down to the mall to go shopping and don't feel like shopping afterwards. And there's nothing down at the mall, okay? And also, I do want to say thank you to Ms. Collins and to the board and to the newly elected board members for your transparency. I truly appreciate it, and I think you're doing a great job. I am very disappointed in the previous administration and the decisions that were made by the two board members who still sit here today and supported that lease agreement. And I agree with with the other gentleman who said, you know, Mr. Christo had mentioned that, you know, he agreed with he agreed to sign that, or he agreed and supported that lease agreement because he was taking the advice of six-figure people. He did say that. And he's just an elected official. I'm sorry, but each of you have a job to represent the people. And that, excuse me for saying this, that was a back alley deal. When they entered an agreement without the knowledge of the residents and signed the lease agreement without apprising the residents and giving them a voice in it, that is despicable. So I'm asking you, as our elected officials, when you look at this and you vote on this, do you want to support a deal that was made in the dark of the residents, without their knowledge, without their consent? Or do you want to listen to what people are saying to you today? And I really hope you really think about that. I agree that the police station needs a new building. They need more space. It's really important. Like I said, I've worked in court systems for a majority of my career and with police departments. There are other avenues than Viaport. And like it was said before, Office Max or other areas. BBL is a wonderful construction company. They have built beautiful courthouses and police stations in the capital region. Maybe it's worth getting an estimate from them and or any other contractor. I'd just like for you to consider what the residents are saying when you vote. Thank you so much for your time.
Is there anyone else? Go ahead.
Lori Brooks, 1364 Evergreen Avenue. Last week when I was here, I was provided a copy of the lease, and I do have a leasing background. I deal with state leases every day. I read through the lease, and I'm not sure if the public knows, but on top of the cost of the rent and the utilities, every year we would pay escalations, 10% of the bills of the Viaport. The space on top of, we would take the space as is and all of our renovation costs, but not only of taking the space as is, if you've been to the mall and the parking lot, most leases, when you go into the space, they have to provide it as built out to office space, building grade. The parking lot has to be usable. And taking it as is means that we are fixing up the parking lot. We are not even, the landlord's not even contributing to making it plain vanilla box, which most, and I deal with state leases, the landlord contributes to making it a vanilla box. And anything that we as the state wants above and beyond a vanilla box, that's what we pay for. So this, you're taking it as Kmart, and anything above Kmart, you're paying for. So if you guys decide to do a lease or even scale back the lease to just the town, the courts and the police department, I would hope that you would fight for at least a vanilla box and a workable parking lot. Because that's what most state, and I would hope town leases would include. That's just a basic, I don't know who you had negotiate, but escalations are escalations. They're just what they are, and you can't get around them. But vanilla box is something you should fight for. As for owning, you really don't want to own a part of something. If you're gonna own a whole building, not part of a mall. Own a whole Staples, Office Max, whatever. Maybe look at what properties the town already owns and maybe find some land somewhere. I don't know. I really don't know what the town owns. Is there a piece of land somewhere, maybe down by at the bottom of Dickershade Pit, like where the fire department does their little training? Do you own that land? Can you build a building down there? I don't know. Look at think outside the box. You know, maybe you could build something for the court and the police down there, or just the court and let the police expand and take over the whole building and just build a court, something down there. I just look outside the box and explore all options is just what I'm asking. They do need something, but just think about all your options. But don't try to buy a piece of something. Try to own a whole something so you have control. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. We seem to have more people that want to speak the longer we go on. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Yes.
Don't be shy.
Yeah, don't be shy. You have every right in the world to come up and speak. Okay? And nobody else? Then I'm closing privilege of the floor, and we'll move on to resolution. Our first resolution, all right, this is ridiculous. Our first resolution is Resolution 236 of the year 2022. The clerk will read.
To authorize the preparation and filing of a petition to the county legislators seeking to legalize and validate the adoption of Resolution 21421 pursuant to County Law Section 227.
Is there any discussion? Okay, do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Do I have a second? Excuse me, I'm sorry. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
I'm sorry. Motion by Mr. Dodson, seconded by Mr. Mastriani. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou is absent. Mrs. Miller Herrera?
I'm going to explain my vote. Can everybody hear me?
No, Samantha, you're going to have to close.
Folks.
Can everyone hear me? How about if I'm louder and I don't get any closer? I'm a little bit of a germaphobe, sorry. In August 2021, the town board voted to authorize Supervisor Thomasone to negotiate a lease to consolidate space to house the town offices, the court, and the police department at Viaport. The rationale behind the Viaport decision was that they could construct a space to suit us, provide adequate space for future growth, and help us resolve a long-standing problem of compliance with the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, in substantially more affordable manner than repairing the two existing buildings. Upon completion of the build-out, the town would move forward with appraising and making an offer to purchase the property. Why not do it at the time? Why not set a price? We were at the height of the real estate market and did not want to lock ourselves into a price that would not be market value at the time of purchase. Studies were conducted on the needs of the police department, the courts, and the other departments here in the town hall building. Plans were drawn up, made part of the lease, and the deposit was forwarded to Viaport to get started on the build-out. Viaport took their property off the market despite other offers. What I suppose wasn't contemplated during this time was a new administration would look to reverse course. And frankly, it wasn't obvious to me until last week. The new administration met with Viaport and engineers and added $4 million to the budgeted project, never taking the time to have a good faith discussion with Viaport about the perceived deficiencies in the agreement, but having renderings drawn that included things like additions. So we sit here now, 8 months into a new term, looking at a variety of options, but no plan or clear path forward. I've heard the concerns of the community, and I have the same concerns, and it's affordability. Is this project affordable? With the new administration's upgrades, absolutely not. Should we look at these upgrades and exactly how much they constitute in this price? How much was built in for inflation? Because it sounds to me like maybe we got a little bit of out of control in what we wanted once we saw what the project looked like. The inflation rate is 9.1%, so that accounts for $470,000 of that $4 million add-on. What about the other $3.5 million? It included changes like a full teardown of the greenhouse area for a lobby instead of working with what was there. It includes additional vehicle bays that were not originally requested by the police department. It includes upgraded landscaping, and it does include paving. Is that what we want? Is that what we need? Well, frankly, it depends on the price tag, and at $4 million extra, I'm not sure it does. If we don't go forward with a move to Viaport, whether that is through a purchase or a lease, and we vote tonight to void the contract, what do those costs look like for the town and for our residents? The new administration plans to spend our money anyways. They plan to bond $15 million to renovate this building and the police building, if not more. They've not built in costs for litigation with Viaport or loss of our deposit. They've not built in the details that I was told caused the Viaport project to balloon to double the original budget. By the time we get detailed plans, what will the inflation rate look like? At 9.1%, that's an additional $1.3 million. They also have not built in long periods of downtime or the disruption that we saw with the renovations that were done at the senior center that caused long-term closures and required us to borrow space from Viaport. It's time to take a hard look at what our town needs for the future, and at an added $3.5 million in upgrades for Viaport, or $15+ million for renovations to these buildings, it's not what we need during a recession. It's time to tone down both our egos and the political discourse and go back to the drawing board on all of these projects. And it has to be done before we make a costly error. Viaport has reached out looking to work out a plan, one that might avoid litigation. I was told today that those calls have gone unanswered. Tonight's agenda shows from 4 resolutions that appear to be contradictory in nature that this board is not ready to move forward because we don't have a strategy and we don't have a cohesive plan. We're basically throwing mud at the wall and waiting to see what sticks. I'm going to abstain on my vote for all 4 resolutions tonight because I cannot in good conscience strap us into a prolonged legal battle. I also cannot say that investing $15 to $20 million into this building and the police department is the right move for our police department, for our courts, or for the public when they enter these buildings. With that, I've explained my vote and I abstain.
Mr. Dodson?
No.
Mr. Mastriani?
I'm voting no.
And Mrs. Collins?
No.
3 noes, 1 abstain, 1 absent. Passes.
Next resolution is resolution number 237 of the year 2022. The clerk will read. I'm sorry. The next resolution is resolution number 237.22 of the year 2022. The clerk will read.
To recognize that the lease agreement for the office space at 93 West Campbell Road and by and between Viaport, New York, LLC and the town of Rotterdam is void.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. On the question. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christo is absent. Mrs. Miller Herrera?
For the same reasoning I've already expressed, I abstain.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
I vote yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
3 yes and 1 abstain and 1 is absent.
Resolution passes. Our next item is resolution number 238 of the year 2022. The clerk will read.
To reauthorize the lease agreement for office space at 93 West Campbell Road by and between Viaport, New York, LLC and the town of Rotterdam, subject to a permissive referendum.
Any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. On the question. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christo is absent. Mrs. Miller Herrera?
For the same reasoning, I abstain.
Mr. Dodson?
No.
Mr. Mastriani?
My vote is no.
And Mrs. Collins?
No.
3 no, 1 abstain, 1 absent.
Resolution passes.
No resolution.
Oh,
Failed.
I'm sorry, failed. Sorry about that. All the screaming I'm doing. Cutting off oxygen to my brain. Our next resolution is resolution number 239 of the year 2022. The clerk will read.
To authorize the supervisor to enter negotiations with the Viaport, New York, LLC for the purchase of premises.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. On the question. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christo is absent. Mrs. Miller Herrera?
For the same reasoning, I abstain.
Mr. Dodson?
No.
Mr. Mastriani?
No.
And Mrs. Collins?
No.
1 abstain, 1 absent, 3 noes, failed.
That concludes our resolutions for tonight. Is there anything on the liaison reports? Good job. How about on miscellaneous?
I'd just like to acknowledge that we had a very, very nice night last night at the for the National Night Out. Police put on a great event, and the community showed up, and we had a great time. And I just wanted to thank the Rotterdam PVA for the hard work they did, showing their support for the community and having such a nice event.
Anyone else wish to speak under miscellaneous? This concludes our business for tonight. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson, second.
I'll second it.
Second by Mastriani. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.